Today we're going to talk more about the passé composé with the helping verb avoir. This time, instead of talking about regular verbs, which were the ER, IR, and RE verbs, we're going to talk about some irregular verbs in the passé composé, still using the helping verb avoir. So most of these verbs that I've put on the board are verbs that you'll recognize, but just in case you don't, I'm going to first go through the list of infinitives and tell you what they mean in English, and then we'll look at their past participles and how to use them in the passé composé. So first we have the verb prendre, which means to take. Next we have the verb apprendre, which means to learn. Comprendre means to understand. Avoir, to have. Être, to be. The verb faire, which means to make or to do. The verb boire, which means to drink. Courir, to run. Pleuvoir, to rain. Falloir, to be necessary. Lire, to read. Dire, to say. Écrire, to write. Connaître, to know. That's to know in the sense of knowing a person, a place, or a thing. And then we finally have the verb savoir, which also means to know, but savoir is to know information, factual things. The past participles for these verbs are as follows. So prendre, apprendre, and comprendre, you can see they all have something in common, and that is the root verb prendre. So the past participles are also similar. Prendre, pris. Apprendre, appris. Comprendre, compris. The verb avoir, past participle, is eu, être, été, faire, fait, boire, bu, courir, couru, pleuvoir, plu, falloir, fallu, lire, lu, dire, dit, écrire, écrit, connaître, connu, savoir, su. So unfortunately, the only way that you can get to the point where you can use these and feel comfortable doing that is going to be to memorize the past participles. The other verbs like parler and other ER verbs, parler, manger, voyager, donner, oublier, all of those, it's easy to say, well, I know how to make the past participle. I just take off the ER and put an E with accent aigu. That's true. Verbs like finir and other regular IR verbs, finir, choisir, réussir, obéir, désobéir, bâtir, rougir, there's a whole lot of them. They're all, the past participle for all of those is also formed in the same way. Just take off the R, right? So that's simple enough. The RE verbs, regular RE verbs like répondre, apprendre, descendre, you just take off the RE and add a U, and you have your past participle. But for all of these, you will have to memorize them. Before we move on and I'll show you the examples, I just want to point out two things, and that's for the verbs pleuvoir and falloir. So the verb pleuvoir means to rain, and so it's only used in the third person singular, which means it's only going to have the subject il as a subject. And why? Because il replaces le temps, which is the weather, and the weather is the only thing that can rain, right? I can't rain, you can't rain, but il can rain, the weather. So il a plu, it rained. Now the verb falloir, this may not look familiar to you in the infinitive form, but if I told you that it's the same verb as fou, you would probably then say, oh yeah, I've seen that. We've been using that in class. The subject has to be il. Il faut. And that means it is necessary. Remember, il faut is followed by an infinitive. For example, il faut étudier. It is necessary to study. Now that's in the present tense. Fallu is just the past participle for the same verb. So if you take out the present tense verb, faut, add a helping verb, which in this case is still the verb avoir, and then your past participle. We now have il a fallu étudier, which means it was necessary to study. So now let me just show you some examples using a few of these verbs. Okay. So the first example, I've used the subject je. Notice that I've written all of the subject pronouns in green and all of the helping verbs in red. So this is the verb avoir. Et, a, avons, avez, on. I've written all of the past participles in blue. Past participle pris, so the infinitive is prendre. Past participle bu, the infinitive boire. Fait, faire, lu, lire. Couru, courir. Dit, dire. Right? So, a few examples. J'ai pris le bus pour aller à l'école. Meaning, I took, and remember you can't say took without a helping verb, I took the bus pour aller à l'école. Pour, whenever it comes before an infinitive like this, means in order to. So, I took the bus in order to go à l'école, to school. Tu as bu une limonade au café. You drank a limonade. Remember, that's not the American kind of lemonade. This is more like Sprite or 7-Up. It's a sparkling limonade. Au café, at the café. Il a fait très beau hier. Il a fait. Now, whenever I say il in this case, and il a fait très beau hier, it did something very nicely yesterday, but it doesn't tell us what it did. It just did. So that's an indication that we're talking about the weather here. The il is le temps. So, il a fait très beau hier. The weather was very nice yesterday. Remember, anytime we talk about the weather, we usually use the verb faire because it's what the weather is doing or making. I just wanted to put up an example of the verb pleuvoir over here. Back when we were talking about infinitives and their past participles, I showed you the verb pleuvoir and the past participle plu and told you that il can be the only subject. Same thing, il is the weather, like it is here. Il a fait très beau. Well, here, we don't have to use the verb faire because we actually have a verb that means to rain in French, and it's pleuvoir. So, il a plu. Never j'ai plu, never nous avons plu. The only thing that can plu is the weather, il. Next example. Nous avons lu une histoire intéressante. So, we read une histoire intéressante, remembering that most of the time your adjectives in French are going to come after the noun, and then you have to make agreement with the noun. So we say une histoire intéressante, putting intéressante after histoire, and since histoire is feminine, we're going to add an e to this adjective, just making agreement. Vous avez couru au parc. Do you remember what this infinitive is? Courir is the infinitive, okay? And up here, in fact, infinitive of lu is lire, to read. So, vous avez couru au parc. You, and this you can either say that vous is singular, but rather formal, or it may be used in a plural sense, okay? So just remember that vous, it just depends on the context. The context is what will tell you who vous is actually referring to. So, vous avez couru, you ran in the park or at the park. Could also mean to the park. Again, it depends on the context. And finally, the last example, dit is the past participle. So the infinitive is dire, means to say. Don't confuse dire with parler. Right? Parler is to speak, dire is to say. Je dis bonjour, mais je parle français. Right? I say hello, but I speak French. Not the same thing. So ils ont dit, they said, bonjour au professeur. So there's what they said. Ils ont dit, they said, bonjour, hello to the teacher. Voilà. Remember, professeur is always masculine as well. So me, I'm the professeur, but I'm still le professeur. If I shorten it to prof, I can be feminine. Alors, je suis la prof. D'accord? I hope that you have found this helpful. If you did, please let me know in your comments. And also tell me if there's something that I could do to make the lesson more clear, or if there is a particular lesson that you would like help with, and I'll see what I can do to get a lesson online for you. Thank you very much. Au revoir.